Yo, YouTube, what is good, bruv gang, what is good, and we are back with another video. Now, I've always loved voice acting in JRPGs, especially since it could be a very dialogue and text heavy genre. So I recently started my journey with the Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, which to some people's surprise actually is the only Final Fantasy game I've yet to play. Final Fantasy VI is a game that is talked about a lot, and the general consensus is that this is the best game in the series. Currently, I'm 10 hours into the game and I can already see why this game's story, world and characters are so well loved. So huge shout out to Backlog Battle. If you guys don't know who he is, I'll be leaving his channel on screen and in the description below. But I was in his Discord the other day having a discussion with someone about Final Fantasy VI and how this was the first non-voice acted JRPG I'd played in a while and just how refreshing it felt. And that got me thinking. So in this video, I wanted to discuss 4 of my favourite non-voice acted JRPGs and why I still love no voice acting in JRPGs to this day. Final Fantasy VI. So I wanted to start this list off with Final Fantasy VI as the game is fresh in my mind and was the inspiration behind this video. So as mentioned, Final Fantasy VI being the first non-voice acted JRPG I'd played in a while just felt so refreshing for me. With so many modern day JRPGs being voice acted, and voice acting standards of course improving as the years have gone by, it's rare in today's JRPGs that we see no voice acting. Now with Final Fantasy VI of course being an older title, the pixel remasters of the older games in the series from 1 to 6 just make you feel like you're playing a literal modern day classic. So when I compare a recent title in the series like Final Fantasy XVI, which I recently played, which is fully voice acted and has cutscenes that will essentially make you feel an attachment to characters, feel characters' emotions, making you feel the weight of cutscenes, letting you experience the highs and lows, I still personally feel all these emotions in a voice acted JRPG because you are seeing all these things in real time. Now with that being said, Final Fantasy VI as mentioned is an older title with no voice acting, but I somehow still felt the same emotions, if not more than I did in the entirety of Final Fantasy XVI, and I am only 10 hours into the game so far. So for me personally, I feel reading text gives you a real sense of imagination. I always liken it to being a kid reading a book. Your imagination comes up with voices for characters and you become more attached to the story, world and characters, making you pay close attention to everything that is happening. Now, of course the graphics in Final Fantasy VI cannot be compared to the modern standards of 16, but I still feel Square Enix did an amazing job of creating a beautiful world and characters, and being able to portray emotion through 2D pixel graphics is something that has always fascinated me, which is just an absolute testament to the quality of writing in older JRPGs, and in this case Final Fantasy VI especially. So for me personally, I think by the time I end my journey with Final Fantasy VI, I think it will be up there as one of my favourite JRPGs ever, and most definitely one of my favourites in the entire series so far. With an amazing world, an extremely likeable cast of interesting characters, a gripping story, and some incredible writing to boot, Final Fantasy VI so far just ticks every box for me in a classic JRPG, and so far is easily a big reason why I still love non-voice acted JRPGs till this day. Suikoden 1 and 2. So if you guys know me well and are fans of the channel, you will know just how much I love the Suikoden series of games, but Suikoden 1 and 2 in particular. So I did mention this in a previous video, which I will be leaving a card to on screen so you guys can check that out, about JRPGs I feel are a 10 out of 10. But I mentioned in that video about me coming back to Suikoden 1 and 2 back in COVID of 2020 as an adult. I felt me going back and replaying the games just gave me a deeper sense of appreciation for the incredible writing the game had. So Suikoden 1 and 2 is known for having a deep, mature, war-driven and political narrative which is conveyed beautifully through the game's writing, making you feel every line of text as the story progresses. Now this may be up for debate, but for me personally, I still feel to this day Suikoden 1 and 2, just like Final Fantasy VI, was ahead of its time when it comes to writing in a JRPG. And I feel if the game were to be remade to a modern standard with voice acting, it may take away from the game's incredible story and characters. So when it came back to me going back and replaying these games, I just felt it was so hard for me to put them down, as the story kept me on edge throughout, making me want to find out what would happen next. Both games do an incredible job of making you feel the political aspects and hardships of war. Again, just like Final Fantasy VI, how emotion is portrayed through 2D graphics is something that was executed superbly throughout these games, and with the updated HD remasters of these games on the horizon, I cannot wait to dive back into Suikoden and experience that incredible story once again. Dragon Quest V: Hand of the Heavenly Bride. Not very many Dragon Quest stories have had me hooked in from the first line of text right to the very last more than Dragon Quest V. So Dragon Quest V is a game I and many others hold in high regard as one of the best games in this series, and with good reason too. Story-wise, the game is a literal journey and coming-of-age story where you go from a young child to a fully fledged adult with children of your own, letting you experience this story right from the very start right to the very end. So just like the previous 2 games mentioned, Dragon Quest has some really good writing. I wouldn't say on the same level and depth as Final Fantasy VI and both Suikoden games, but it does an amazing job of keeping you hooked and letting you use your imagination as to how characters would sound, with the music in this game being a great way for you to feel the emotion in each line of text throughout the story. Dragon Quest for me story-wise is most definitely my favourite in the series, but with the game taking you on such an epic journey, the pacing of the story was so well done I thought, and I think is a big reason why this game is so well loved. The one thing that I love about Dragon Quest V is the game does a great job for its writing of making you feel at the start like a vulnerable but curious child to a protective and courageous father, and it's something I had never really seen done before in a JRPG at the time. So Dragon Quest V is a game I'll always hold in high regard. With a beautiful world, characters, and a beautifully well written story, it is most definitely a reason why this game remains one of my favourite non-voice acted JRPGs to this day. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Now this pick may come as a surprise, but for those who have played the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series of games, you will know the exact reason why this series is on the list. The Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games growing up as a kid, aside from the mainline games, were easily some of my favourites in the series. So when we talk about a story that makes you feel engaged and makes you feel the story is actually about you, no non-voice acted game does a better job at this than the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. So with those not familiar about how the older games work, the games start you off by doing a personality test, essentially giving you a list of different scenarios where you will answer them through multiple choice answers. This in turn will determine what your starter Pokemon will be to start your journey. So without spoiling too much of the story, the personality test does actually mean something, as the crux of the story is centered around you, a human being dropped into the Pokemon world in the form of a Pokemon. Now moving on to the writing and story throughout the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games is easily some of the most emotional stuff I've ever played through in a game. Portrayed beautifully through the game's 2D sprite work, and especially the amazing soundtrack, the world and characters just feel so alive, making you feel the weight and emotion throughout the game's well executed writing and story. So for me personally, no game has pulled at the heartstrings more than Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Going on this beautiful well-told adventure with your trusted friend and companion you meet at the start of your journey, it's so easy to grow an attachment to each Pokemon throughout this game. So the one thing that I absolutely love about the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games is that of course we know Pokemon essentially can't talk, as they all have their own personal sounds they make, but in the Mystery Dungeon games, every Pokemon is given text lines and the game does a fantastic job at allowing you to use your imagination as to how these Pokemon would sound if they were to talk, and is a big reason why, especially when playing through this game when I was younger, just made me fall in love with each Pokemon so much more. Personally, I feel the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games are some of the most slept on JRPGs, but for me, they will always have a special place in my heart when it comes to story, and is easily my favourite non-voice acted JRPG of all time. So that'll do it for this video guys. I really appreciate you guys watching. I'd love to know what some of your favourite non-voice acted JRPGs are, so please let me know down below in the comments. So please like, sub, share if you're new, hit that notification bell to get notified of my videos first, and I hope I can be you guys' #1 source for all JRPG news. So from me to you, this has been your bruv, the big bruv, and I'm gonna catch you guys on the next video. I'm out. Peace!